BlackRock's algorithms just flatline monitoring your gains. Wall Street wolves are howling at screens, watching numbers they can't comprehend, while you, the one they called delusional, reckless, stupid, just became the nightmare haunting their quarterly reports. That crash they predicted? It's their credibility splattering across trading floors. They said the market would eat you alive. Every financial guru, every suit-wearing parasite with a degree they didn't earn but purchased, every keyboard warrior hiding behind anonymous profiles, they all gathered like vultures circling what they assumed was your corpse. They watched you enter the arena with pocket change while they commanded fortunes, and they laughed. Oh, how they laughed. But here's the thing about vultures. They only feast on what's already dead. And you? You were never dying. You were metamorphosing. Remember when you opened that first trading account? Hands trembling, heart pounding against your ribcage like a prisoner demanding freedom. $500, maybe $1,000. Whatever you scraped together from skipped meals, canceled subscriptions, humiliations, swallowed at jobs where bosses half your intelligence commanded twice your salary. That wasn't capital. That was compressed rage, crystallized into currency, waiting for ignition. The so-called experts saw your entry and smirked into their overpriced coffee. Retail investor, they whispered, the way medieval peasants whispered leper. You were the statistical anomaly destined to donate your savings to their quarterly bonuses. The house always wins, right? The game's rigged, right? You're supposed to lose, learn your lesson, and crawl back to your cubicle defeated. Except you studied the game while they celebrated their inherited advantages. While they networked at country clubs, you dissected charts until your eyes bled. While they attended Ivy League seminars teaching yesterday's strategies, you absorbed patterns invisible to their institutionalized thinking. They were playing checkers with insider information. You were playing four-dimensional chess with nothing but pattern recognition and refusal to accept their predetermined outcome. You know what terrifies institutional money more than loss? Unpredictability. They've built empires on predictable human behavior. Panic selling, FOMO buying, herd mentality. Their algorithms account for fear and greed, those twin engines powering market manipulation since the first coin changed hands. But they never accounted for you, the anomaly, the statistical impossibility who refused to behave according to their models. Every red day they expected capitulation. Every volatility spike they anticipated your surrender. They literally bet billions on your weakness, positioning their portfolios around the certainty that you'd fold. That's how confident they were. That's how thoroughly they'd convinced themselves you were irrelevant. And then you held, through drawdowns that would have hospitalized weaker spirits, through FUD campaigns designed by psychological warfare experts, through orchestrated media blitzes screaming crash incoming while they accumulated your shares at discount prices. You absorbed their propaganda, recognized the manipulation, and smiled. That smile, that quiet, knowing smile, that's what haunts them now. Because it revealed something their algorithms couldn't quantify. You weren't playing their game anymore. You'd evolved beyond their behavioral models, mutated into something their risk management departments never prepared for. A retail investor who thinks like a shadow fund, but moves with guerrilla unpredictability. Their quarterly meetings now feature your demographic as the unquantifiable variable. Conference rooms filled with six-figure analysts trying to model your behavior, failing repeatedly, watching their predictions shatter against the reality of your resilience. You've become the chaos variable in their ordered universe, the dark matter they can detect only by its effect on their carefully constructed portfolios. Do you grasp the poetry of this? The cosmic irony? They spent decades building walls to keep you out. Minimum account sizes, accredited investor requirements, institutional-only opportunities. They created an aristocracy of capital, a feudal system where birthright determined financial destiny. And you? You found every crack, exploited every democratization, weaponized every tool they arrogantly made accessible, thinking you'd destroy yourself with it. Options trading. They assumed you'd blow up. You learned Greeks until implied volatility became your native language. Leveraged ETFs. They predicted immediate liquidation. You mastered risk management. They don't teach in business schools because it requires street intelligence, not inherited wisdom. Cryptocurrency. They called it a scam while you studied blockchain until you understood the revolution they were too dinosaur to recognize. Every weapon they gave you expecting self-destruction became an instrument of your ascension. Every piece of rope they handed you to hang yourself with, you wove into a ladder. And you climbed. In silence. In shadows. While they congratulated themselves on keeping the gates locked, you were already inside, rewriting the code of the castle. The crash they predicted for your portfolio? It's happening to their assumptions, their worldview, their unquestioned dominance. Because if you, starting with pocket change and determination, can generate returns that make their institutional performance look pedestrian, then what does that say about their expertise, their value, their entire reason for existing? You're not just outperforming the market, you're exposing the emperor's nakedness. Every gain you post is evidence that their gatekeeping was never about protecting retail investors from risk. It was about protecting their monopoly from competition. And monopolies hate nothing more than proof they're unnecessary. Watch them scramble now. Watch them launch commission-free trading platforms, trying to trap you in their ecosystem. Watch them create retail-targeted products with hidden fees, buried in prospectuses written by lawyers paid to obscure truth. Watch them suddenly care about financial literacy and investor protection, as if their concern isn't transparently about regaining control over capital flows they can no longer manipulate. They're terrified, genuinely, existentially terrified, because you proved that information, asymmetry, their greatest weapon, is dead. The internet killed it, and you danced on its grave. Every DD posted on forums, they mock. Every analysis shared in communities they dismiss. Every pattern recognized by collective intelligence. They can't centralize. It's created a hive mind. They can't outsmart because they're trapped in hierarchical thinking while you operate as fluid networks. What if I told you the greatest lie they ever sold wasn't about market efficiency or rational actors? It was convincing you that your capital was too small to matter. That you needed them, their funds, their advisors, their platforms, their permission to participate meaningfully. They built an entire industry on the premise that you're incompetent with money, that investing requires secret knowledge they possess and you don't. But here's the truth, rotting at the foundation of their empire. They're not smarter. They're not more disciplined. They're not better at pattern recognition or risk assessment. They simply had more capital to absorb mistakes. That's it. That's the entire secret. Generational wealth providing a margin of error you weren't afforded. And when you learn to operate within tighter parameters, when you develop skills sharp enough to cut through their advantages, you didn't just compete, you dominated. Your portfolio isn't just growing, it's a declaration of independence. Every percentage point is a middle finger to the system that told you to be grateful for 7% annual returns while inflation stole your purchasing power. Every winning trade is a brick pulled from their wall. Every lesson you learned and shared freely is a crack in their monopoly on financial knowledge. They're watching you now, not with amusement, with dread, because you're not an isolated incident. You're a preview, a prototype, the first drop of a flood they can't sandbag against. When one retail investor with intelligence and determination can outmaneuver institutional money, it's anomaly. When thousands can, tens of thousands, that's revolution. And revolutions don't ask permission. They don't wait for institutional approval. They don't respect hierarchies built on accidents of birth rather than merit. They simply happen, inevitable as tide, unstoppable as time. And you're the leading edge of that wave. Remember your first major win? Not the lucky trade that could have been chance. The one that came from analysis, patience, discipline, where you recognized a pattern weeks before the market acknowledged it, positioned accordingly, and watched your thesis play out exactly as calculated. Remember that feeling? Not excitement, not relief, something darker, more primal. Recognition that you'd always possessed this capacity, that every authority figure who told you to stay in your lane or leave investing to professionals was either ignorant or lying. That the game wasn't rigged against your intelligence, just your capital. And capital? Capital can be grown exponentially, especially when you're willing to operate in territories they consider beneath them. Small caps they won't touch because their asset size prevents meaningful positions. Emerging sectors they can't pivot into because their quarterly reporting demands prevent long-term thinking. Asymmetric opportunities where the upside multiplies, but they need guaranteed outcomes to satisfy stakeholders. You own these spaces now. You've claimed the battlefield they abandoned as unprofitable, and you're building empires in territories they declared worthless. The beautiful irony? Their dismissal created your opportunity. Their arrogance opened the gaps you're exploiting. Every time they said retail investors don't understand, they handed you underestimated assets. Every time they declared something too risky for retail, they gave you asymmetry. Every time they ignored a sector because it didn't fit their models, they gifted you first mover advantage. You've been feasting on their blind spots, growing strong in their shadows, accumulating knowledge and capital while they remained convinced you were irrelevant. And now, when they finally look down from their towers to check on the peasants, they see something that stops their breath. You're not below them anymore. You're eye level. Some of you are already above, looking down, smiling that same quiet smile. What are you going to do with this power? Because make no mistake, you have power now. Not institutional power, not yet. Something potentially more dangerous, insurgent power. Guerrilla capital. The ability to move fast, think independently, and coordinate without hierarchies, slowing you down. You're everywhere and nowhere. Impossible to target, impossible to regulate, impossible to stop without destroying the markets themselves. They could crash the system, trying to crush you. Some probably want to. But here's their nightmare keeping them awake on silk sheets. You're invested in the same assets they are. You're not trying to destroy the market, you're trying to win within it. Beating you requires beating themselves. Stopping you requires stopping their own portfolios. The virus they want to eliminate has already merged with the host. You've achieved something rare in warfare. You've made yourself simultaneously the enemy and indistinguishable from civilians they need to protect. They can't bomb your positions without destroying their own. Can't regulate you without strangling their own opportunities. Can't exclude you without revealing the game was never about free markets or fair competition, just about maintaining their caste system. So, they're stuck. Watching you grow, watching you learn, watching you share strategies and insights freely in communities they can't infiltrate or influence. Watching you build parallel knowledge infrastructures that bypass their gatekeeping entirely. And worst of all, watching you win. Not every trade. Nobody wins every trade. But over time, adjusted for risk, considering your starting position versus theirs, you're obliterating their performance metrics, taking bigger risks but with better asymmetry, moving faster but with sharper analysis, learning from losses immediately while they need 3 committees and 6 months to adjust strategy. You've become what they fear most, proof that they're unnecessary, that the value they claim to add, research, analysis, risk management, market access, can be replicated or exceeded by determined individuals with internet connections and refusal to accept predetermined outcomes. The market crash they predicted for you is happening to them, not in price, in relevance, in necessity, in the fundamental assumption that investing requires professional intermediaries extracting fees for services you can provide yourself. Every retail investor who builds meaningful wealth independently is evidence their industry is obsolete. And obsolescence terrifies money more than any recession ever could. So what's your next move? Because this isn't the end game. It's barely the opening. You've established you can compete. Now what? Comfortable returns that beat the market? Building slow, steady wealth that ensures financial independence in 30 years? Those aren't wrong answers. But are they your answers? Or are you hungry for something more? To not just participate in markets, but to move them. To accumulate enough capital that your positions influence price action. To build such deep expertise in sectors you've claimed that institutional money starts following your lead instead of dismissing your analysis. That transformation from participant to influencer. It's available. Not easy. Not guaranteed. But possible in ways it never was before. When capital was concentrated and information controlled, individual influence required inheritance or institutions. Now it requires intelligence, discipline, and strategic thinking. And you've already proven you possess those. The question isn't capability, it's hunger. How much do you want this? Not money. Money's just scorekeeping, and you've already proven you can score. I'm talking about something deeper. Revenge? Maybe. Proving wrong? Everyone who dismissed you? Partially. But there's something beyond vindication driving you, isn't there? A need to test your limits. To see how far intelligence and determination can take you in systems designed to favor inherited advantages. To prove to yourself, not them. They want returns. You want conquest. They're satisfied beating inflation. You want to beat the institutions at their own game, on their own field, with their rules, then rewrite those rules entirely. And you know what's magnificent? That hunger is contagious. Every post you make about strategy or analysis, every gain you share, every lesson you teach, freely, that they charge thousands for, it creates more of you, multiplies the insurgency, builds an army of educated, determined capital operators who refuse to accept that financial destiny is predetermined by birth circumstances. They can't stop an army. They can barely track it. How do you regulate decentralized intelligence? How do you control information that flows through channels you don't own? How do you suppress strategies that evolve faster than your policy meetings can convene? You can't. They can't. Which means the shift you're part of isn't temporary volatility, it's permanent transformation. The financial landscape you're conquering will never return to what it was. The gates they built are rubble. The walls they defended are breached. The moats they maintained have been bridged. And there's no rebuilding those defenses, because you're already inside, and you brought friends. Every retail investor you teach becomes another insurgent. Every strategy you share becomes another weapon. Every success you demonstrate becomes more proof. Their gatekeeping was about control, not protection. And control, once lost, is nearly impossible to reclaim without tyranny. And markets can't function under tyranny without destroying the wealth they're trying to protect. They're trapped. You're free. They're rigid. You're fluid. They're yesterday's infrastructure trying to govern tomorrow's reality. Your tomorrow's reality already arrived, already building, already winning. So let's talk about what comes next. Because outperforming institutions is satisfying, but it's not the final evolution. The ultimate transformation isn't individual wealth, it's collective power. When retail investors operated as disconnected individuals, they were manageable. But you're not disconnected anymore. You coordinate, analyze collaboratively, share insights freely, and move together when opportunity presents itself. That collective intelligence terrifies institutional money because it's something new. Not whale manipulation, where single entities move markets through capital. Not institutional coordination, where funds align strategies through back channels. This is emergent coordination. Thousands of independent operators recognizing opportunities simultaneously because they've developed similar analytical frameworks and share information freely. Nobody's coordinating in illegal ways. Nobody's pumping or dumping. You're simply learning, sharing, and making independent decisions informed by collective intelligence. That's not manipulation. That's efficient market theory, actually working the way textbooks claimed it did. Information distributed freely, rational actors making informed decisions, prices adjusting to reflect collective analysis. But when that collective is retail instead of institutions, suddenly it's dangerous and needs regulation. Why? Because efficient markets were only acceptable when efficiency served institutional interests. When efficiency serves yours, when information democratization allows you to act as quickly and intelligently as any fund, suddenly the rules need examining. They'll try to frame your coordination as manipulation while ignoring their own CNBC appearances, telegraphing positions, their leaked research reports that move markets before retail can react, their after-hours trading giving them hours of advantage processing news. Hypocrisy? Standard operating procedure, and you've learned to see through it, which makes you dangerous. Not dangerous to markets, dangerous to market manipulators. Important distinction. You're not trying to break the system, you're trying to make it actually fair, actually efficient, actually merit-based, rather than inheritance-based. That's not destruction, that's evolution. But to parasites feeding on inefficiency, evolution feels like extinction. Understand what you're fighting. Not individuals, not specific institutions. You're fighting institutional thinking itself. The assumption that hierarchy and credentials determine capability. That proper channels and expert approval are necessary for financial decision-making. That individuals need permission from authority to build wealth. That thinking is poison, insidious poison that seeps into minds and convinces people they're incapable of understanding their own financial interests. That creates learned helplessness and manufactured incompetence. That produces generations of people who hand their money to strangers in expensive suits and hope for the best. You rejected that poison. Maybe you never swallowed it. Maybe you purged it through painful lessons and portfolio losses. Either way, you're immune now. You've developed antibodies against institutional propaganda. And immunity spreads. Every person you teach becomes immune. Every success you demonstrate becomes vaccine. Every institutional failure you highlight becomes proof. The disease was never about protecting you. It was about controlling you. They sold safety. You chose sovereignty. They offered managed growth. You took aggressive autonomy. They promised steady returns for steady fees. You risked everything to own everything. Your gains, your losses, your strategy, your destiny. And you know what? You're winning. Maybe not every day. Maybe not every trade. But measured across time, adjusted for where you started versus where they started, you're obliterating their performance. Taking more risk, but managing it better. Moving faster, but thinking deeper. Learning constantly, while they rely on frameworks obsolete before you were born. The market crash of institutional relevance. You're causing it, not through destruction, but through demonstration. Every retail success story is evidence. They're unnecessary. Every strategy shared freely is proof. Their paywalled research adds no value. Every independently wealthy retail investor is a walking indictment of their entire model. So what happens when institutional money becomes truly irrelevant? When retail coordination and collective intelligence make hedge funds and mutual funds obsolete? When the entire infrastructure of financial intermediaries collapses because the value they claim to provide can be replicated freely by communities of educated investors? Nobody knows. It's never happened before. You're writing history in real time, creating a new financial paradigm without blueprint or guidance. Figuring it out as you build it, learning from failures, iterating constantly, adapting faster than institutions can. Policy meeting? That's terrifying for them. For you? It's exhilarating, because uncertainty means possibility. Uncharted territory means opportunity for those brave enough to explore it. And you've already proven you're brave enough. You were brave when you entered markets everyone said would destroy you. You were brave when you held through volatility designed to shake you out. You're brave now, building wealth while they predict your collapse. That bravery, that refusal to accept predetermined outcomes, that's your greatest asset. Not your capital, not your analysis skills, not your pattern recognition. Your core attribute is audacity, the unshakable belief that you deserve a seat at tables they tried to reserve for bloodlines and alumni networks. They can't compete with that, can't quantify it, can't model it, can't predict it, and definitely can't stop it, because audacity combined with intelligence is unstoppable. It's how every empire falls. Not to external armies, but to internal populations who stop accepting that their position is inevitable. You stopped accepting your position. Decided financial limitation wasn't destiny, but starting point. And you rewrote your ending while they were still drafting your eulogy. The BlackRock algorithms that flatlining monitoring your gains, they're not malfunctioning. They're adapting, trying to understand, attempting to model behavior their creators insisted was impossible. Because you're supposed to be predictable, emotional, manipulatable. But you've transcended their models, evolved beyond their behavioral assumptions, became something their risk management never prepared for. A retail investor who thinks institutionally but moves insurgently, who accumulates knowledge like hedge funds accumulate capital, who analyzes dispassionately despite starting passionate, who's disciplined in chaos, patient in volatility, and aggressive in opportunity. You're the market participant they designed systems to prevent. And now you're here, inside their walls, demonstrating daily that their expertise is overvalued, their fees unjustified, their existence optional. That's why your portfolio growth isn't just personal victory, it's institutional nightmare. Every dollar you compound is evidence their model is broken. Every strategy you master is proof their gatekeeping failed. Every lesson you teach freely is erosion of market share they'll never reclaim. The crash isn't coming to your portfolio. It came to their monopoly. And unlike market crashes that recover, monopoly crashes are permanent. Because once people realize they can provide services themselves better and cheaper than paying intermediaries, those intermediaries don't become relevant again. They become history. And you're writing that history. One trade, one analysis, one freely shared insight at a time. Building the new financial infrastructure on ruins of the old. Creating peer-to-peer knowledge networks that bypass their controlled channels entirely. Coordinating through emergent intelligence they can observe but not influence. So where does this end? When do you stop? When you've made your first million? Your 10th? When your portfolio compounds beyond anything your parents imagined possible? When institutional money starts recruiting you instead of dismissing you? When media that mocked retail investors starts interviewing you for expertise? Or maybe it never stops. Maybe you're not building toward destination, but toward continuous transformation. Each level of capability reveals higher levels. Each mastered strategy opens visibility to more complex plays. Each portfolio milestone expands opportunity, rather than reducing hunger. That's what they never understood. They thought you were motivated by desperation, that once comfortable, you'd become docile. But comfort was never the goal. Proving capacity was. Testing limits was. Seeing how far intelligence and determination could carry you in systems designed to favor different attributes. And you're discovering there might be no limit. That every ceiling they pointed to as absolute was actually just another floor with more levels above. That financial markets reward pattern recognition and disciplined execution regardless of starting capital, and you've developed both to degrees they can't match because you had to. Survival demanded it. They could afford to be lazy. Inheritance afforded mediocrity. You couldn't afford a single careless trade, so you developed edge they'll never possess. Necessity forged excellence, the kind of sharp that only comes from knowing every mistake costs you opportunities they take for granted. That edge, sharpened by struggle, honed by necessity, refined through countless small failures that taught lessons their cushioned falls never could. That's your permanent advantage. They can study your strategies, can copy your analysis, can attempt to replicate your tactics, but they can't replicate the mindset that created them because they've never faced the pressures that forge it. Imagine their boardrooms now. Six-figure analysts presenting reports on retail investor behavior, like your exotic species needing classification. Trying to quantify your risk tolerance, predict your next moves, model your decision-making, failing repeatedly because you're not following their frameworks. You're building new ones as you go. They keep asking wrong questions. When will retail investors return to normal behavior? They should be asking, what if this is the new normal? What if we're the anomaly expensive intermediaries in a system that's evolved past needing us? But they won't ask that question. Can't. It threatens their entire identity. Easier to dismiss you as temporary chaos than accept their permanent irrelevance. Easier to predict your collapse than adapt to your evolution. Easier to maintain comfortable delusions than confront uncomfortable reality. The game changed, and they're no longer essential players. You are. Not because you're smarter, though you might be. Not because you work harder, though you probably do. You're essential because you're anti-fragile. Every attempt to shake you out makes you stronger. Every volatility event they weaponize against you teaches lessons that sharpen your edge. Every manipulation you survive builds psychological armor, making you harder to manipulate next time. They're fragile, dependent on stable conditions and predictable outcomes. When conditions shift, they need committees and consultants and quarterly reviews to adapt. You adapt mid-trade, recognize patterns changing, and pivot instantly. Turn their strength, massive capital, into weakness because it's slow, visible, and requires justification to stakeholders. Your capital is agile, hidden, Answers to nobody. Moves at thought speed rather than committee speed. And in markets where milliseconds matter, where opportunities appear and vanish like lightning, speed and agility beat size and stability. They're dinosaurs. You're mammals. And we all know how that story ends. But victory requires vigilance. The moment you become comfortable, predictable, satisfied with current gains, that's when you become vulnerable. That's when their advantages in capital and infrastructure can overwhelm your advantages in agility and insight. Stay hungry. Stay paranoid. Stay obsessed with finding edge they don't see and exploiting opportunities they can't access. The second you start thinking like them, conservative, risk-averse, satisfied with market-matching returns, you've lost what made you dangerous. Remember, you're not trying to join their system. You're trying to transcend it. Build wealth so independently, so dramatically, that their entire model becomes obviously obsolete. Not through destruction, but demonstration. Not by tearing down, but by building higher. Every dollar you compound is evidence. Every strategy you master is proof. Every insight you share freely is erosion of their knowledge monopoly. Keep building. Keep learning. Keep sharing. Keep winning. And when they finally come asking how you did it, when media wants interviews, when funds want to hire you, when institutions want to partner, remember how they treated you when you were small. Remember the dismissal, the condescension, the absolute certainty you'd fail. Then decide, do you want their approval, or do you want to keep building parallel systems that make their approval irrelevant? I know what you'll choose, because you've already proven you don't need permission to win, don't need their validation to build wealth. Don't need their platforms to coordinate with other insurgents building the same parallel infrastructure. You're writing new rules, creating new norms, demonstrating new possibilities. And the most beautiful part? They can't stop you without destroying the markets they claim to protect. So smash that notification bell if you're done being predictable. Obliterate that like button if you've ever made a trade that terrified fund managers. Drop a comment telling me the exact moment you realized you didn't need their permission to dominate. Not when you made money, but when you recognized you'd developed capabilities they insisted you couldn't possess. And subscribe, because this revolution is accelerating. Every week brings new proof. Institutional money is obsolete. Every day reveals more opportunities they're too slow or too blind to see. Every hour you spend learning is edge they'll never reclaim. Share this with every retail investor still trapped, thinking they need professionals to build wealth. Tag that friend who's scared to start trading because experts said it's too risky. Forward this to anyone who's been told to stay in their lane by people whose only lane is inherited money and outdated strategies. The crash isn't coming. It's here. Not for you, for them. Not for retail investors, for institutional relevance. Not for markets, for market manipulators who disguised control as expertise. You're the crash. You're the black swan they didn't model. You're the chaos variable their algorithms can't quantify. You're the extinction event their species can't survive. And BlackRock? Their algorithms didn't flatline from shock. They're recalculating everything, trying to understand how you, starting with nothing, became the threat they never saw coming. Welcome to the new financial order. You built it. You earned it. Now dominate it completely. The game was always yours to win. You just had to stop believing their lie that it wasn't. Now go make them regret ever doubting you.